And we're on. Hey guys. Um, hot day outside the past 2 days. From where I'm sitting. It's our last division. Beginning of August. We're already done. AFC North is coming right up.
hmm
Very, very competitive division. It's always a dogfight here. You could expect to see a lot of within 2 points, 3 point games over here, especially like as we get to November, December. These games in these divisions become super important. Um, Kosham, first off, before we get into it, how are you doing? And um, what's been going on with you lately?
Um, I don't know. Nothing too much has been happening. Started watching like Attack on Titan with my brother. So anybody that has seen it, it's pretty cool. I've seen it all. He hasn't seen it, so it's a cool show. I don't know. That's something that's up. My Wi-Fi actually also went down the other day. So we were supposed to record like 2 days ago, but the Wi-Fi wasn't here. So I mean, like I could pull it up on my phone, which I normally do, but then I couldn't set up our division spreadsheet that I create for both of us to kind of see the team rosters and everything like that. So we kind of pushed it back. But yeah, Wi-Fi's
Yeah,
good
no,
now.
I Attack on Titan is something that's on my watch list. You're not the first person to bring it up. A lot of people have recommended it to me.
hmm
Um, yeah, lately I haven't been watching that much of TV. I've been listening to Coldplay a lot. It's been
hmm
really helpful. Um, participated in this grueling basketball tournament. I am injured in all different spots right now. So walking into the office was not fun at all. We were playing a bunch of back-to-back games in the heat, and yeah, felt the toll of it. But it was all good fun. I love playing the sport I love, and even if we're not getting paid for it or whatnot, we're just doing it out for fun. So it was mostly for a charity event. So
Well, that's hype.
great cause, and yeah, a lot of interest in these tournaments. So hope to continue it doing it year after year after year. Um, let's start with the AFC North as a whole.
Quick second. Sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Um, take a mini break here.
Okay, we good.
I'm good. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Alrighty. Okay, cool. So back to regularly scheduled programming over here. AFC North, fun division. Um,
hmm
we're expecting a lot more out of some teams. We're trying to identify what teams look like with new
hmm
situations. So plenty to dissect here. Of course, what comes to mind when you look at this division? Do you think there's a clear winner, or do you think it can go a number of
Um,
different ways?
yeah, I feel like it could potentially be competitive. I think there's two teams here that could be a race between, but overall, I do feel as though the Ravens are probably just a straight up front runner for taking this division. Um, specifically, just because, I mean, Lamar Jackson was my personal MVP of last season. I'm not upset with Josh Allen getting it. I mean, I think both of them are pretty neck and neck with that. But Lamar Jackson, I think, very easily could have won MVP. You have Derrick Henry. I mean, I'm just looking at the team right now, but you got superstars on offense. You got superstars on defense. It feels like they've been drafting well and developing players really well too. So um, they're my kind of standalone superstar team within this division, despite competition might be close.
Yeah, no, let's start with them because top to bottom, you could argue they've had the best roster in the NFL the past 2 years. And the
hmm
pressure is really on them to finally close the deal because you could look at a team like Buffalo and say Josh Allen's doing everything he can to keep them within like like within the Super Bowl's reach. But they've
hmm
always gone up against Patrick Mahomes and they always lose by 3 points. Whereas with Baltimore, a lot of the times you see them with the way they exit off the playoffs, it's because they make their own mistakes. Like
hmm
you saw that against the Chiefs, you saw that against Buffalo,
hmm
and it's really like you're waiting for them to hit on all cylinders finally when they go against the Buffalo Bills or Kansas
hmm
City Chiefs. So
Yeah.
um, it's really it's not really a question of is their roster good enough? I think it is. It's can they limit the amount of mistakes they make at this stage of the season? Because
hmm
they're a really great offense. They've always been known for their tough defense. And honestly, I think they have one of the best rosters in the league when you
hmm
look at them.
Yeah, and like, yeah, I mean, like, yeah, you look at top to bottom. Like you said, very strong team, and it feels like even when like they lose guys in free agency or whatnot, the holes don't feel like nearly as glaring as I feel like you see with some of these other teams in the league. Because like honestly, I'm looking at like some of the losses they had over the course of this offseason. I mean, technically, like there's Trey White. Objectively, like whatever, he barely played. But I feel like you lose Michael Pierce, which is kind of feels like a big blow. Patrick McCarry, I'm a fan of. Marcus Williams is a good player, you know. But then you look at the team, and I'm like, sure. I mean, like I guess missing out on Michael Pierce is kind of the big thing, but like they've historically been good at developing offensive linemen, and so it's like, I mean, Andrew Voorhees, Ronnie Stanley, I like Tyler Linderbaum, I like. They draft or second year player Roger Rosengarten, which I'm a fan of as well. Defensively, you're like sure, Marcus Williams and Trey White are out of the secondary, but you have Nate Wiggins entering year 2. You draft Malachi Starks. You bring in Jair Alexander in free agency. You also acquired Chidobe Awuzie, who I think on a fair amount of teams could be a starting cornerback. And so like you lose players, but they're really good at just either acquiring a talent via free agency or drafting well and then developing these guys into true starters. These like I mean, a couple of years ago you had Hollywood Brown, right? I mean, he was a whatever wide receiver. I think he's somewhat overrated, but you lose him and you're like, well, he was kind of the only standalone wide receiver on this Ravens offense. Like, what are they going to do? He drafts Zay Flowers, who both years he's put up like 800-ish yards. And then last year, Rashad Bateman kind of had a little bit of a breakout year too, just being able to stay healthy and being a true number 2 in this offense. And so like you've been able to develop guys who even within the first like year or two, you may not have think have been successful, but like pan out to be well.
Yeah, I largely agree. And then they always find these random veterans that are going to continuously add to the team. Last year, it was Derrick Henry. We loved the selection of Derrick Henry. This year, for me, it's the addition of DeAndre Hopkins. I
Mm-hmm.
think the DeAndre Hopkins signing, the fact it's like not even being covered on this podcast for 7 minutes has been crazy
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't fall off a cliff. If you think about where he started his career on the Texans and the amount of quarterbacks like Caruso he had to endure before Deshaun Watson in his prime, and then you go to a
Mm-hmm.
guy like Kyler Murray. We've seen the frustrations between him and Marvin Harrison Jr. not being on the same page, and Marvin Harrison Jr. having to make freaking acrobatic catches to have an impact in the season and not work on the timing routes and stuff. I don't think you're going to suffer those issues with Lamar Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. I think he's going to be a better player for it. I don't think this is another like OBJ going to the Ravens. I think this is entirely different
Mm-hmm.
dynamic. If you remember when Hopkins was on the Chiefs, there were some games where he just absolutely took over
Mm-hmm.
because the Chiefs didn't have an identity. And I think this is going to be one of those moves where in the playoffs and in the clutch, like he's the type of player to step up in addition to a Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm.
Moving to their schedule, wow, they start off Sunday night back at Buffalo, and that I'm gonna tune in to see that because
Mm-hmm.
tickets are going for about $270.
Mm-hmm.
That is gonna be a great game. That is gonna be a great game. And then I know this is one of the few teams where it's like, okay, you got Buffalo, Detroit, Kansas City, Los Angeles, Texans, like all within the first 6 weeks before you buy 7th week, and then you close out against like Cincinnati twice in like the span of like 11 days. Then Vikings, and then you got Packers sprinkled in there, and then your division rival, the Steelers. Like, I get it, but at the same time, I'm probably gonna say they're also an 11-14 type win team just
Mm-hmm.
because the talent on this roster I think is unmatched by most of the teams that you put on their plate.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll put that 11-14 win projection for this team, and like you said, like the schedule, they have a couple tough games, but I count through like the amount of objectively difficult games I see on their schedule, and I count about 6 of those. I mean, sure they might lose an offshoot game, maybe another team, has kind of that resurgence, but there's only like 6 teams on this really 5 teams, one of them being the Bengals, who they play twice, who I feel like could give the Ravens a true run for their money. Uh, which I'm like, yeah, like so, like there's that, but also like it's not like these teams that I'm thinking of that give them a run for their money are like glaringly better teams. Like Ravens are one of the premier teams in the league, so it's like you said. I mean, there's like the Bills, Lions, and Chiefs. Arguably, those 3 teams plus the Ravens, in my head, are probably the top 4 teams going into this year. Uh, and so it's like, again, it's like, sure, so these are like the 3 hardest teams you could be facing, but you're amongst that top 4 group. So it's not really a situation where I'm like, oh shoot, these are going to be a guaranteed loss. Sure, I mean, it could be for all we know, but like they're in that same tier of teams. So they could win those, they could lose those, but yeah, I feel like 11 to 14 ish sounds about good too.
Yeah. I have no disagreements there. One guy I want to talk about. I get it. He's a rookie. And I get it. He's part of like a revamped secondary. I would keep your eye on Malachi Starks, their first round
Mm-hmm.
pick. He is a guy that I think is going to have a really big impact, and it's been a player the Ravens have eyed for a while. When you have guys like Kyle Hamilton saying, this guy is miles ahead of where I was as a rookie, and you see the kind of career that Kyle Hamilton has had in his pro career, that's not a light statement. And when you have guys like Eric DeCosta saying he's one of the best interviews we've ever had, they wanted and targeted a guy like this. And when he plays like he's CJ Mosley as a linebacker spot and has the quickness to compete with anybody in the back end, watch out. Like I don't think when you look at like the safety duos that Baltimore had ran out in the first half of the season when Kyle Hamilton was gone last year, it was awful. And as a Bears fan, I was frankly shocked with how like Eddie Jackson had looked in the first half. He looked bad, and I think compared to what you had going on last year, starting out the season with Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks, I think they're going to be a lot better defense coming out of the gate. And he's just a player I'm excited to see.
Yeah, another rookie too that I'm pretty excited for is Mike Green. Right now, he's not listed as a starter. I mean, like you look at the guys who they have. I'm a fan of Kyle Van Noy. I'm a fan of Odafe Owe. So it makes sense, that he's not starting. But he was, I think, in a lot of people's eyes, a potential late first round type of pick. So obviously, teams maybe saw something that we didn't, so that's why he fell towards the bottom of the first or the second round. But like, it's still a guy that I think a lot of people had high in their own personal minds, and so that plus I think just the fact that they're so good at replacing players when they're ready to move on. I think the big one that I think of is with Patrick Queen a couple years ago, where they drafted Trenton Simpson, right? And everybody's like, well, it feels like maybe a bit of a reach. Like you already got Roquan and you got Patrick Queen. And in my head, I'm like, this is a clear sign to me that they're not super happy with how Patrick Queen is playing. Obviously, because you're spending super high capital on a off-ball linebacker here, and then what happens the next offseason? Patrick Queen does not get re-signed to the team, and then you have Trenton Simpson come in as a starting linebacker here, and then Mike Green. I mean, like I'm a fan of Owe, I'm a fan of Van Noy. Van Noy's also like in his 30s, and so this could be a sign that maybe Van Noy, after like another year or two, could be on the move from this team, and then you're able to slip Mike Green, who I think everybody's pretty high on. Maybe it's a big. I didn't see Mike Green's tape too much, but maybe it's a big, athletic, high potential kind of player that might take some time to develop into a pure pass rusher. And so you have Van Noy sit here for another year or two, and then he's out. Mike Green is able to develop a little bit more as a rotational backup piece, and then now he's a starter. So I'm just a huge fan of their development process, but I think that's another guy, maybe not this year to look out for, but in the next like year or two.
I mean, it's smart planning, right? It's what Howie Roseman would do on the other side of the conference, and like it's just what great organizations do. They understand like what could potentially happen given where people are in their careers, and you got to have backup plans like this. And like this is why the Ravens consistently year after year after year are always in the mix because they never shorten their window on like any position group for an extended amount of time. They always have a plan. Um, would I have loved to see Tyler Huntley still on their roster? Yeah, absolutely. But like having Cooper Rush to back up Lamar Jackson, that's probably the only weakness I really perceive on this roster. So I think
Mhm.
they're top to bottom really, really well done. Um,
Mhm.
like not much to say. You're getting Keaton Mitchell back with a Justice Hill to kind of complement Henry. They got a lot of weapons and depth behind it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think they're going to be a pretty good team again this year. um, I think though, all the, like fantasy wise, it's kind of tricky to touch these three starting receivers here: Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and DeAndre Hopkins. I know it's like from what I've been reading, there's been a lot of discourse on like those three players specifically, and like people are saying like it's weird how Lamar Jackson threw for so many yards, but like I think Zay Flowers was the highest score. I mean, from last year, obviously Hopkins isn't here, but it was the highest score. But he finished like wide receiver 20 something, and then just because despite having as many pass yards as Lamar did, and as many touchdowns as he did, apparently for the amount of I guess yard like there's like if beyond 3,500 pass yards or something, Lamar Jackson was at the bottom of pass attempts, which I thought was kind of a surprising stat. So even like you said, like I think Hopkins can be a really efficient contributor, but we may not see that on like the game day stats of like high efficiency, like high numbers, and more of
Right.
like getting key, yardage turn basically of like, key first downs or, just getting a clutch catch here and there might be the capacity that we see DeAndre Hopkins and not the 1,400, 1,100 kind of receiving yard seasons that we've seen a couple of years ago from him.
I mean, if there's one guy to look at, like from a skills position standpoint, other than running back and quarterback, um, it's probably tight end because you got
Hmm.
Likely out with the injury, right?
Hmm.
It's like full Mark Andrews. You're not going to see Mark Andrews start the way he did last year. So like he's the guy I'd be targeting here.
Hmm.
Maybe
Yeah.
say like the only reason I put up Hopkins is because he's probably going to go the cheapest out of those three options because Baden had a
Hmm.
really good season last year.
Hmm. Yeah.
Hopkins' value is not really considered that high considering the Chiefs moved on from him,
Hmm.
and the Chiefs already have like really good options with Rashi Rice and Travis Kelsey and Xavier Worthy,
Hmm.
right? So it doesn't really make sense to keep Hopkins if they don't need to. But I think for the round that Hopkins is going at, I would consider it. Now, if his stock climbs even higher, then I'd reconsider it. It's be like, okay, I'd rather target a injured Chris Godwin instead because
Hmm.
he might get hyper targeted. Whereas in Baltimore, like you mentioned, it might just be a hyper pass efficient offense because of how much they put on Derrick Henry's shoulders. So
Hmm.
um, I think the guys I would be targeting out of it are Andrews and Flowers.
Yeah.
Right. So that wraps it up for the Ravens. They make it to the Super Bowl. I'm not surprised, but they got to get out of their own way in order
Yeah.
to reach there. A team that has to get out of their own way, as regards to just quarterback and quarterback stability, Cleveland Browns. Like you
Hmm.
thought the Chicago Bears were bad over the last couple seasons. This is probably the one team that tops them. Yeah, you got like a million different quarterbacks. Right now, it's just restricted to Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gable, Shador Sanders. Talk about Shador in a bit, but what are your expectations for this team?
Um, my expectations are pretty low for this team. I wouldn't be surprised if they're one of the worst teams in the league going in this season. And like, I mean, it comes with the fact that you play your own division, and I think every team in this division, I think, will be in some capacity competitive. Besides the Browns, and then you look at the other like non-divisional games. I'm pretty sure you who do you play? Oh my gosh. So you face
It,
the AFC East, which has the Bills. You face the NFC North with the Vikings, the Lions, the Packers, and the Bears. And if you remember from last time, we were like the worst of these teams at worst is maybe winning 7 games, and so like we're pretty high on that NFC North right here. uh, Obviously the Steelers, like I mean, you could argue like the
Look at
Dolphins,
the first.
Patriots, and the
Look at the
Jets.
first 8 weeks. Like they could go 2-6 going into the bye.
They could have no wins going into the bye. In all honesty, like.
Right. I was trying to be optimistic. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is a brutal start to your schedule,
Mm-hmm.
especially when you're trying to figure out who is your starting quarterback.
Mm-hmm. Like
This
I
is
look at their
insane.
schedule and I'm like, okay, maybe the freest games they have on this is the Titans and maybe like the Jets or something. Like, but even then, I'm not even saying those are free, but I'm just saying like the weakest opponents they have on here that I feel like you might be able to argue in the same caliber. And even then, I think the Jets are like a tier above them, anyways. And so my projections for their wins right here is 3 to about 7 wins at best.
I mean, if I had to disagree, it's because I don't see them hitting 7 wins. I
Yeah,
really don't.
I was like
I'm gonna
super
say three
super
to six.
optimistic,
Yeah.
and the 7 wins, because this is also me being realistically. I was like, honestly, a 1 to 5 win season was kind of like feels the most right to me in my head. But I'm like, it's hard to predict a team winning only 1 game over the course of a season. So I kind of
Right.
gave them some extra points. And then on top of it all, I think, yeah, the offense, nightmare situation. But I am a fan of the defense and kind of the direction the defense has been heading. And so from that end, I'm like, if like it could be like in years past, but like the Patriots, the Jets, kind of like the Broncos from like 4 or 5 years ago, where you're like, their offense isn't really going to carry like bring them to any wins, but their defense is good enough that like they might be able to have really low scoring games that they might be able to squeak in. And so that's why I was like 3 up to 7 potentially, but 7 is like their defense obviously is on fire, and then Joe Flacco is clicking like he did 2 years ago or 3 years ago whenever he played with the Browns. But I see that pretty unlikely. That's why I have 3 to 7 here. Should I change that
I'm,
to my 1 to 5 original prediction?
I mean, depends how confident you are. It doesn't sound like you're very confident,
Yeah,
but
I'll
I'm
change that to a 2 to 6, right
okay.
underneath, to be
Cool.
like my
I
alter.
mean, you could have been right if they have 5 wins, no matter what. But I mean, I'm just looking at their key losses.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this list: Dalvin Tomlinson, um, Jedrick Wills, Amari Cooper, Nick Chubb, Weinrich Loud. That is that is just a couple of the names on the list. And I'm looking at what's replacing them from as far as skill positions. Okay, you got David Njoku still there. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of Cedric Tillman,
Mm-hmm.
but you got Jerome Ford, like who's probably the most consistent guy there. With like, I love Quinshon Judkins, but he's involved in legal battles that he stupidly placed himself in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, then you got the line, which had problems, but they should be back to normal. They look deeper than normal, but the receivers just like outside of like a Jerry Judy, like consistent, like okay, random 200-yard game. Was not expecting that, but like you have him. Like, is he going to finally put it all together? You have a lot of questions. Like, can Cedric Tillman take the next step? Will Deontay Johnson finally be a factor after a couple of years? DeAndre Carter, how much is a factor he plays? Um, like Dylan Sampson, what is his role? Like, they quickly went from like one of the deepest wide receivers to one of the most confusing wide receivers, like
Mm-hmm.
in 1 year. So I think even if Flacco is clicking, it's like, does he have to force to feed it to one guy that steps up, or how is that going to work? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm very lost when looking at like what their philosophy is here.
I will say, like, to an extent, I think your losses that you have here are overblown. Yeah, it's a lot of players, but like, I'd argue Tomlinson is the biggest loss, followed by Jameis Winston in terms of like how I rate these players going into this season. Um, Jedrick Wills, unfortunately, is a bust. So, like, he sucks. I mean, like, Elijah Moore could just kind of feel like never get it done. Donta Foreman is good one game and sucks the next game, and it's a repeated cycle for all eternity. Uh, like, I mean, but Jeff Swaim is a guy. And then, I mean, like, Nick Chubb, he could be all right, but, like, so far from Texans training camp, I've kind of just heard negative, like, reports about him, which I think is the only thing that objectively matters in training camp. He's positive, positive hype is just coach speak. Same with, like, teammates hyping up a player. They're just trying to hype up their guys. But then, like, unfortunately, it feels like Nick Chubb may be washed, which is a big bummer, especially, like, before last season. I think, like, we could place him in our top 10, but, like, I mean, from, like DeMeco Ryans, I think, was saying, like, he's a good blocker, and that's kind of the only praise he gave to. He's like, Nick Chubb loves football, and he's a solid pass blocker, and I'm like, that might be the worst news to hear from a aging running back coming back from injury, because, like, you want to hear, like, no news is good news for me from from a guy coming back from injury. Good news is no news to me. Bad news or whatever news like that is kind of what scares me. And so, I mean, I think before hearing that, I was like, Nick Chubb might be solid. Hearing that, I'm like, it might be Damian Pearson, Woody Marks, or whatever as kind of the 1-2. It's and so, like, I mean, this is kind of just a Nick Chubb tangent right now, but overall, I don't like the losses that the Browns have had. I don't think are actually that big of a deal. I mean, I think a lot of these guys just turn into rotational pieces. But still, I mean, 2-6 win cap on this team, like, they suck. So,
I mean, they didn't replace those rotational guys, and I couldn't disagree with you more on Nick Chubb. Like, I think it's Kyle Shanahan's view on running backs is perfect. Like, you don't know what you have until, like, you see them in the games, right? So it's a possibility. I'm not saying it can't happen. But I always want to take a look at, like, how coaches talk about these things, because sometimes there might be politicking around the idea for competitive reasons, right? So it's I know what you're saying there, but I think we need to wait for a couple games, because I don't think he lost his top speed. I think when testing out his speed, I think he hit, like, his top speed was, like, over 20 miles per hour, which is, for a running back, that is, like, right on par with, like, an NFL caliber back. So I think he could still have a great NFL career. You just don't know what that looks like. Can he still make the jump cuts? Can he still make the cutbacks that you need? And Houston will have to figure that out. As far as, like, Cleveland's problem was, like, how do you replicate the production that Nick Chubb had on this roster? I think it's for Judkins, but Judkins is facing legal battles right now. So is it Jerome Ford? Is it Dylan Sampson? Like, I love Dylan Sampson's game, but, like, I would use him more as, like, a chess piece and not, like, necessarily, like, a guy that's trying to replicate the production of Nick Chubb. And it's going to have to be a by committee approach. And that can open up yourself to weaknesses if you don't have a strong running back at that. I know Jerome Ford has had some great play, and he's been a guy we've touted for a couple of years, but, like, I still think Judkins might be the more talented back out of him. So we'll have to wait.
Yeah, for sure. Judkins is the best running back in this room right now. Right. I'm pulling up Ford's stats. Right. Last year he had 565 yards, averaged 5.4 per carry, which it's solid. I mean, especially he was splitting too. So, I mean, like, and, like, I think another thing too is, like, a lot of times, at least we as fans, like, look at these teams and, like, the losses, and it's like, oh, we need to replace the losses in, like, an exact way if it's an elite player. But if it's an elite player, they're elite for a reason, and it's, like, unrealistic to try to fill, like, the gap perfectly. And so, like, there is a world out there where, Dylan Sampson in his non-Nick Chubb running style, because he's a very different back from Nick Chubb. Could
Right.
still be highly efficient, just in like a different capacity, in some type of different capacity, because it's like you look at some like the top tier running backs and you can't really say, I mean, they have similar traits, but like Jahmyr Gibbs to Derrick Henry, who I think are two of some of the better running backs in the league. It's like you wouldn't try to replace Derrick Henry's game with how Jahmyr Gibbs plays and vice versa, right? And so it's like you see what players you got and you try to like work the scheme to fit the types of players that you have to maximize their efficiency.
Yeah. And I think a bigger issue here is obviously quarterback.
Yeah.
Browns have been looking for a consistent quarterback play for 25 years. And a lot, like the primary focus of the draft was like, when was Shedeur Sanders going to be picked? As the first round happened, as day 2 happened, as day 3 happened, finally got picked in the 5th round. And I think even the Browns, even though they selected him, you hear Jimmy Haslam's comments about it, being like, "Oh no, that was a total Andrew Berry call. It was clear we didn't want him at then." And like, it's like the Browns also passed on him, 2nd pick of the draft, the 5th pick, 2 times in the 2nd round, 2 times in the 3rd round, 1 time in the 4th round, and then they came up and picked him. That is just like, and you pick another rookie on top of it. Suddenly, you're telling this guy you got to win the job outright against a situation that is like completely unfair. So it's like, they're probably going to end up with like 4 quarterbacks on their roster, and Flacco's probably going to get the start. But it's like, did you just sabotage a guy's career when you just drafted him? And that would really suck. But I say this to say that Shedeur Sanders on Friday night when he starts has a golden opportunity to just claim the job from the get-go. He has a goal, depending on how he does. Like, it's like his situation right now reminds me a lot of like what people expect out of Bronny James when he came into the league and when he joined. It's very much the same, because a lot of the teams that Shedeur was stated to be like, oh, he would only want to go to this team or that team. Like, a lot of blame's being placed on Deion Sanders, and I think because of the perception of Deion Sanders in the media, they're taking that on Shedeur. And like, I don't think Shedeur is kind of like the guy that the owners are afraid of describing him as he could be, as like Shedeur Sanders' real personality. I think he's just somebody who's just trying to overcome the barriers placed in front of him because of the greatness of his dad.
Yeah, it's a weird draft class for them. Simply because it's like you take one later-ish round quarterback, either Dylan Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders here, and you kind of like open yourself up to be like, okay, well, like if the guy that we take here sucks and we suck, going into next season, we can pretty easily take a quarterback pretty high in the draft, which I mean isn't out of the question. I still think for them, if they're in a spot to get one of the best quarterbacks in the class, I think that is a valid move for them to make. But it just kind of feels weird that you're investing 2 picks in rookie quarterbacks to then take another rookie quarterback. So you have 3 quarterbacks within like that are both first and second year players on your team, as or at least on the roster, when I think is a weird way to build your team. So like the way this draft strategy makes me feel like they don't want to take a quarterback next year, just because they took 2 rookie quarterbacks in the class, especially with just the name association that these 2 guys also happen to have. Yeah.
Who do you think was the job?
Out of like the 5 quarterbacks on this roster, because they signed Tyler Huntley too.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like it's Joe Flacco's job to lose. I feel like we've seen him at least be able to functionally run this offense in the past, and somehow he's still slinging it. So like, it's kind of his job to lose for now. But imagine saying 5 years ago that the Browns are signing a Pro Bowl quarterback to be their 5th string guy right now. And that they have a Super Bowl MVP, a Super Bowl champion quarterback, a Heisman runner-up, like as is their quarterback room. But then you look at the actual room for what it is, and you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know what to make of this. I probably just gonna leave on the safe side and say Joe Flacco because he's the veteran. He's definitely gonna start week one. Season's end, I don't know what's gonna happen.
Yeah.
Hopefully, the way this thing has panned out, like Shador has been working night and day to improve on like how he was perceived as, like technicality wise and leadership skill wise. And he could take the job at some point during the season. That's what you hope happens. If not, Dylan Gabriel, or if you see a resurgence from Kenny Pickett, you hope to see some sort of improved quarterback play out of those three. If not, you got a stable guy in Joe Flacco. I don't think it's going to help out their prospects much given their schedule, but you do want to kind of figure this out quick and get the answers on it so it can kind of lead to your decisions next year.
Yeah. Another thing with this Browns team is when I was making the rosters and highlighting the different players on here, their class from last year sucks. Like, no one's starting, and it's like what a awful gap here of a class objectively is what it feels in my mind, where it's like you couldn't draft a single starter last year, which, like, I think there's another team a couple weeks ago that I think I mentioned was like, dang, it didn't seem like they had a very good draft last year. They only had like one guy who's like the number 2 wide receiver who's kind of in the starting lineup. But I'm like, the Browns here, I'm like, yikes. Because like the Browns, I mean, granted they didn't have a first round pick, so it's like, sure, you didn't have that, but you drafted Michael Hall, the defensive tackle, in round 2. You get Zach Zinter in round 3. You get Jamari Thrash round 5. Nathaniel Wilson round 6. Miles Harden round 7, who I don't even think is on the team, and then Jawan Briggs, defensive tackle in the 7th round as well. Oh, Miles Harden is here. But it's like, so it's not like high caliber picks, but like the fact that you couldn't find anybody is scary. And then
on top of the Deshaun Watson contract, you got to think about the contract, because when you give a guy a contract like that that you did to Deshaun Watson, the only way out of it is drafting well. And the fact you failed on last year's class, you're riding your hopes on this class. If you're Andrew Berry, you're hoping Quinshon Judkins proves you right when he comes back. You're hoping one of Dylan Gabriel and Shador Sanders make strides. You're hoping for these guys for Harold Fannin to like be a really productive guy. Like, you're hoping a lot of Mason Graham to be the D tackle you missed on last year. Like, that is there's a lot of pressure on this draft class.
Yeah. But like, also, like, how would you feel about them going next season if the only objectively relevant player on this team is Mason Graham from like this year's class? Like, how are you viewing their next couple seasons' future from that point?
I don't know. It depends on the head coach and the GM they're going to hire after that season. Because I don't think we're going to see the same head coach and GM. I think Haslam's going to be done with this. So it's and personally, I probably disagree. I'd probably want to see Kevin Stefanski with like a high profile rookie in this quarterback heavy class that we anticipate coming out. But
yeah,
from like a Browns ownership standpoint, it's like, how do we end up in this situation? You guys made this decision to put the situation in place, and I honestly wouldn't have an opinion until I know who the head coach and GM are.
Yeah, but it would be a scary look for this team.
It's looking like a scary look now and in the future, so we'll see. A team that refuses to be terrible to be good / great is, I think, a best way to describe this team. This team is consistently always having winning seasons, but despite Mike Tomlin never having a winning season, like,
or losing,
the fans want him fired. Like,
yeah,
like it's it's a weird dynamic in Pittsburgh because they haven't won a playoff game in a while, and they're playing like quarterback Caruso over here, and like even before Aaron Rodgers signed, there was a lot of debate. Like we purposely kept this division as the last one to cover because we figured the situation would be resolved by now, and thankfully it has. But um, for Pittsburgh, they're in a weird spot where like just making the playoffs is not good enough
Mm-hmm.
anymore, not by the Steel City standards.
Mm-hmm. I think we talked about this before, maybe even last year about the Steelers, or maybe at the end of the season in terms of like coaching discussions. But little trivia time: what year's playoffs was the Steelers' last playoff win?
I want to say 2011.
2011?
Yeah.
It's 2016,
Oh, okay. Well,
which is a
I was
lot.
really pessimistic.
It's funny because they actually did not win in 2011. They lost to Tim Tebow and the Broncos.
Weren't they in the Super Bowl?
That was
2012.
2010 was their Super Bowl
2010.
against the Packers. The 2010
Okay.
season, I
Gotcha.
think.
So that's 9 years for a team that you're considering has back-to-back winning seasons.
Mm-hmm.
That is not kind of what you expect. Like, yes, you love the winning seasons because you get to see your team in January, but when January hits, they just continuously disappoint.
Mm-hmm.
So it's that just goes to show like at what point is enough, and you gotta purposely tank to be good, or like you gotta start anew from like a culture perspective.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I think for real, Mike Tomlin, I think would sooner retire than put his team in a position to get a high draft pick.
Exactly.
Because the legacy of the winning seasons, I think, is so important. Which I agree with. Like, it's actually such an insane stat to have of never having a losing season as a head coach for as long as he had head coach his team. He also does technically have a Super Bowl win under his belt too, right? Or I don't know. He has
a Super Bowl.
Yeah, right. Because back against
they beat the Cardinals.
Yeah. I was like, how old is he? Was he coaching that? And so it's like he has these accolades to like be a Hall of Fame coach, really. And so it's like you look at the pieces on this team and like the moves that they make, and you're like, they're going to be competitive. And so it's like, why would you tank in some capacity of whether it be roster deconstruction, or just not signing specific guys because you can't, to make you guys uncompetitive. It's like you have all these things to make it so that you can't just lose a lot of games, and I don't think he'd ever allow his team to be in that kind of position. And so they're kind of just stuck in what feels like the 500 mediocrity of like the early 2010, or I guess just the 2000s and early 2010 Rams with Jeff Fisher, I think, where it feels like every year they were like 8-8 or 7-9, and they were just kind of stuck in mediocrity.
You just compared Mike Tomlin to Jeff Fisher.
I mean, like for the past like 4 years, I feel like you could make that argument of like the team's position overall. Obviously, Mike Tomlin, I say, is a Hall of Fame candidate head coach once he retires, just because of his winning accolades and the fact that he has a Super Bowl under his belt. He's been to the Super Bowl twice as well. So like, but yeah. So I mean, like, I have this team winning 7 to 9-ish games, which puts them right in spot to be a winning team. Specifically if they get to that 9-win mark. And you look at the team too, right? And it's like they have a handful of really elite players that I'm a huge fan of. But then they also have like mediocre at the quarterback position, where it's like maybe it's good, maybe not. So I don't know. But it's definitely okay. Yeah, but Aaron Rodgers definitely an upgrade over Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, and Skylar Thompson.
Thank you for the obvious. But I think, they're just one of those teams where I'm going to see them. They probably will lose to the Jets week 1, but they're going to beat like the Vikings. and
Mhm.
it's like it doesn't make sense in your head. And you
Mhm.
see, like somehow, some way, no matter what's put in front of them, they're gonna end up at like an 8. I'll give them 8 to 10 wins.
Mhm.
Because I actually think they can sweep Cleveland. Um, I could see them beating the Colts. I could see them beating the Jets, the Seahawks. Well, I could see them going 4-0 to start. I really
Right?
could.
Like
I would not be surprised because they have the defense still. They
mhm.
have Aaron Rodgers. Like you hear about him, like and his improved velocity in camp. Like they have a lot of great things going for them, and the offensive line, who I've like completely raved about um, last season, is still like largely intact. You have that. Like I see no reason why they can't
Mhm.
perform well if Aaron Rodgers is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah. And it's like objectively, Aaron Rodgers having a similar season to what he did last year in terms of yardage and touchdown count, it's really not the worst of seasons. Like it's not worse. I think he wishes he was. Obviously, he's older. He's quite far removed from his MVP years. It feels now, but it was still like 35-ish 100 yards. I like maybe 3,200 yards passing, 20 like low 20s touchdowns, single digit interception count. I think, which I'm like, I mean that I think is a solid year. Plus, I think you're going to a better Steelers team coming from the Jets, you know?
Right.
So it's like if he has 3,500 pass yards, 26 touchdowns, and like 8 picks, I mean, like, that's a really good season. And is like, that's the stats of a winning team, especially looking at the defense, like you said.
Considering his age too, that'd be mighty impressive. But I also look at I love the Caleb Johnson selection in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
I love that they added DK Metcalf. I would have hoped they kept Pickens, but um, like they still have Calvin Austin, who I've always been
Mm-hmm.
a fan of. The strong offensive line. Pat Fryermuth, I would not be surprised if he puts up a top 10 fantasy season.
Mm-hmm.
I think he might be the best route runner on the team. I really do. Like that's how highly I think of
Mm-hmm.
him. I know they just got Janu Smith, and a lot of people are worried about the Arthur Smith Janu Smith connection. Um, but I don't know. I think that has a lot to do with like quarterback play in Atlanta and how they had to find a way to generate offense
Mm-hmm.
with that limited quarterback play. And I don't think Jimmy Smith can win a lot in like contested one-on-one situations.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, if you
Yeah.
throw him like a tight end screen to like a schemed open play where it's like set up specifically to Smith, he can do some things, especially after the catch. But I
Oh.
don't know. I don't know like man to man, third down, if he's my guy. Pat Fryer, I know can do it. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty high on Pat. Um, I think the big guy to watch out for is Roman Wilson. Because lately in
Mm-hmm.
training camp, it took him and Aaron Rodgers a while to find a connection, but now they have a great connection. And Roman Wilson entering his second season, the one thing he did really well in Michigan was winning in breaking routes. When you
Mm-hmm.
consider like DK Metcalf on one side and Calvin Austin to stretch the field, like that's like one of the bread and butters for Aaron Rodgers. And I think he's a guy I wouldn't necessarily sleep on.
Well,
Um, and I look at him and I look at some of the additions, the major additions they made in Darius Slay and Jalen Ramsey. And even though they lost Minko, which really hurts, it sounded like Minko wasn't the right situation in Pittsburgh. And I think
mm-hmm.
bringing in a veteran guy like Jalen Ramsey, who can play all over the field, like on
Mm-hmm.
top of already having a strong Joey Porter Jr.,
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited about this defense.
Yeah, I think I mean, it feels like the past maybe like couple of years has been this way too. Just the defense being the strength overall of this team, and like I mean, you look at some of the losses, but it's like yeah, Minka, I think is like an objective loss here. You know, Landon Roberts was a solid rotational off-ball linebacker piece, and then Larry Ogunjobi was also a valuable starter. But then they draft Derek Harmon in the first round, which I think is a really solid pick for them. I've been mentioning that I feel like the Steelers have been doing a decent job at like trying to phase in some of the newer players with this team. I mean, like obviously Cam Hayward, he's kind of I feel like the heart and soul of this defense, just because like he's been an established piece of the Steelers front seven
Right.
forever at this point. But
Yeah.
you have Keanu Benton, who they drafted a couple years ago, and he's kind of, he is a starter here. Derek Harmon is, the replacement for Ogunjobi. TJ Watt is TJ Watt. But then you also have Alex Highsmith is good, but who's their starting? Cole Holcomb, is he still here? Yeah. He's still here, but Peyton Wilson, the guy who I was really excited for last year, he's at least currently projected as a, within the starting lineup here. He played decent football last year as well. I think he had a couple sacks and interceptions.
He's a great tackler in space.
Yeah, so like his knock was like to some extent just staying healthy, but it seems like he's doing good on that end, at least for now. And so it's like I feel like they've done a good job at bringing in young players to like be the next phase of the Steelers. We're in a couple of years, Cam Hayward's going to retire, and then TJ Watt's going to be kind of like the old veteran kind of focal point of the defense, because he's like 27-ish now, is he? 26, 27? I don't know. He feels old. But, you have that, and then you have all these younger pieces that are, you're working your way in. But there's that, and then also a huge fan of this team that I've been of is the offensive line.
He's 30 years old, bro.
30, yeah, he's old, man.
Wow.
I was trying to give him the benefit of the doubt and be like, maybe he's late 20s. But no, yeah. I mean, he plays young, But yeah, I'm a huge fan of this offensive line. I think 3-4-ish years ago, I think we were talking about the Steelers, and like their offensive line was pretty garbage. We were talking about how that was one of our biggest concerns about this team. Was like, sure, they got pieces like George Pickens or whatever, flashy wide receiver when they had Juju Smith-Schuster, all that. Like, they have these cool pieces. Najee Harris is cool. Jalen Ward's been cool. They drafted Kenny Pickett. He's having a good preseason, yada, yada, yada. There's all these things in them but the O-line kind of sucks. But you have 3 guys entering year 2 as starters. Isaac Swamalo was actually apparently really good last season. I'm a fan of Broderick Jones. You lose James Daniels, but that's why you spent so much capital into the offensive line. And so now you have what, in my head, could potentially be a top 10 line this year or next season, which I
they
think
gotta stay healthy. They have to stay healthy because their reserves are what I'm concerned about. But I think to your focal point, that all definitely makes sense. I think the one other worry I would have is what happens in the running game now that Najee is gone, because the Jalen Warren starting situation just reminds me of Tony Pollard 2.0.
Yeah.
Like I don't want to immediately paint a broad brush and say like Jalen Warren is going to be that way, but the types of runs where he's like uber efficient at were the same types of runs that Tony Pollard would be, and I struggle to like project if a full workload will be ideal for him. So you're hoping Caleb Johnson is like ready to go right from the start, where he could take up some of that load and potentially be the bell cow back of this offense. That would be my one point of concern. And then can Calvin Austin step up on the outside after DK Metcalf?
Yeah. Yeah, like the running back for me, I do see the questions with that too. I mean, I feel like with your discussion about the Browns and replacing Nick Chubb, feels like Caleb Johnson is a very direct Najee Harris replacement. Their play style is actually remarkably similar, coming from that Iowa offense. So, and like just from what I've heard at camp is he runs well. I mean, I think everybody can kind of make that statement, just how well he ran at Iowa. But his run block or his pass blocking is kind of what's been lacking, and Jalen Warren is just a better overall pass blocker in comparison. And so that's why he's, at least in a lot of people's eyes, will start maybe at the beginning of the season. He'll be listed as the starter, get a higher percentage of, snaps, maybe like 60 to 70%.
First and second down, he's probably going to be used the most.
Yeah. And then later throughout the season, we might see that split be more close to 50-50. Potentially, if Caleb Johnson starts balling out, he could end up getting more of that snap share that I think people potentially hope for, just with the nature of Caleb Johnson's game.
Yeah, absolutely. And then probably at the other end, excited to watch Derek Harmon, see how much he can learn from Benton and Hayward. That should be a fun watch. I think their D line is really, really solid at the top end. We'll see how well that fares throughout the season.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh
Next
yeah,
we go
and
to
then
the
okay, you
team
want
that.
yeah, we're good. We're good.
Okay. Yeah. Next we have a team that's missed the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. Um, Consistently starting off the season very weak. I think there was a stat in like Zach Taylor's career. I think they were like, I don't know if they were like 5-13 in their first 2 games or something like that, but that was like a stat to point out that they start slow every single time, and you can't figure out why. And if you told me that Joe Burrow would put up MVP like numbers, Jamar Chase would break the season record and win Triple Crown for receptions, yards, touchdowns, and he had the lead leaguer in sacks, and you still don't make the playoffs. That is just an outright concern for me when I look at this Bengals team.
Mhm.
Talk to me about what you see potentially in their future this year.
Um, with this team right here, like just with the nature of their offense, I feel like they will competitively be in every single game, as long as Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are both on the field on offense. Um, yeah, the real scare really is just the defense. I think again, because I think I saw a stat where like Joe Burrow has some of the most games at least of quarterbacks currently in the league, uh, where his defense is allowed like 30 plus points or whatever, and like and obviously like just quarterbacks across the board when their defense allows 30 plus points, their record is not very good. And so you can even see that across like Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, where it's like when their defense allows 30 plus points, like they're not winning a lot of those games either. But like just the Bengals defense has allowed that the most for Joe Burrow out of these top quarterbacks. Um, and so it's like I like pieces on the offense. Like I think their offense will cook. And like hopefully they'll have a strong offensive start or just have a good start overall this year. Because, like you said, they started off slow, but then they won 5 games straight to end the season, which is what got them so close to like playoff contention. But yeah, like they started out 1-4 this season, and then they beat the Giants, they beat the Browns, and then they lost to the Eagles. And so it's like, okay, it's it.
But that start is what killed them. Like,
Mhm.
and there's no excuse that they should start out slow when you look at their first 4 games being Cleveland, Jacksonville, Minnesota, Denver.
Mhm.
Minimum, they should be 2-2.
Yeah.
Like with the talent on their offense, they should not finish worse than 2-2 going into week 5.
Hmm. Yeah, because I mean, like going back to the scoring thing too, right? Like, so they lose against Washington. I'm doing a little finger counter here, I guess. Lose against Washington, where they allow 38 points and they scored 33. They lost to the Ravens, where the Ravens put up 41 points to their 38. They lost to the Eagles, where the Eagles put up 37 points. They lost to the Ravens again, where the Ravens put up 35 points to their 34. They lose to the Chargers, who put up 34 points to their 27. They lose to the Steelers, where they allowed the Steelers to put up 44 points on them to their 38. And it's like
Most of
every
those games, they're scoring 35 points.
like
Normally,
they're
that's a win.
and so it really is just like addressing the defense and also just like paying your guys, because like I feel like that's been the discussion of like just you got to pay your dudes so that actually have talent. He's like, and I was like, it's a minor gripe I guess I have with this offseason, like just extending both Jamar Chase and T Higgins. Like obviously, I'd say those two might be the best wide receiver duo in the entirety of the league right now. You might be able to argue like AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, but even then, it's not even close to me with those two. Um, and so it's like, sure, they're phenomenal, but like imagine like you got guys, you're drafting guys, you got guys that you're developing behind those two superstars, and it's like Andre Iosivas, he in his limited playtime last season, I think he did pretty good. You're expecting Jermaine Burton to take a step up. Maybe you let go of T Higgins and you draft, a guy as a like maybe within the first 3 rounds,
Right.
uh,
Right.
like potentially a Jalen Noel, right? Like from Iowa, like because the Texans got Higgins and Noel, you get Jalen Noel here instead as a kind of developmental piece without T Higgins, and then you spend that. How much money are they paying T Higgins? Like 20-30 million?
Too much.
Some crazy number, because obviously it's one of the top contracts, right? And you spend that money guaranteeing Trey Hendrickson is happy with his contract, and then you're able to bring in another key piece on defense, because it's like Logan Wilson's all right. I would have liked if they were able to keep Jermaine Pratt, who ended up going to the Raiders this offseason. I mean, like, there's players that I think you wish that you could make moves for, but you just spent all your money on Burrow, Chase, and Higgins, where now you're in this position. You're like, it's hard to spend top dollar on any other free agents, because then we can't put proper depth or adequate starters at other positions. So that's just
Exactly.
my little Bengals tangent.
Per Gemini, T. Higgins signed a 4-year, $150 million contract. He has $30 million guaranteed. First 2 years are fully guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Annual average salary of $28.75 million. It's the
So
highest paid wide receiver 2 in the NFL.
I feel
But
like by a margin too.
yeah, I mean, but obviously, when you look at how you have voidable years, like with the first 2 years being
Mm-hmm.
guaranteed, most of the money is towards like 2027, 2028. Like
Mm-hmm.
this year, like he's off the books for like 13.8 million. Next season is even less at 7.9.
Mm-hmm.
Like 2027 is 19.2.
Mm-hmm.
2028 is 27.3. So like you look at 46 of that, like 115 million is like not even counting until 2027.
Yeah.
Right.
And like,
So still, you look at that and you're wondering why with the Joe Burrow contract, Jamar Chase contract, both which are absolutely deserving, you have to prioritize those. And I'm
uh-huh.
trying to fill out a roster, and
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to decipher, should we pay the NFL leader in sacks? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a spot you should be in. Like, and especially when your defense was a problem last year, considering how many
Mm-hmm.
points you've been giving up in your losses, and you were having contract disputes with Shamar Stewart. Really? Like, are we
Mm-hmm.
really going to go? And you think about like the defense. Jordan Battle's been given it a lot in like training camp and stuff, but these are the guys you lost on defense last year.
Mm-hmm.
Von Bell, Jermaine Pratt, Sheldon Rankins, Sam Hubbard, Akeem Davis Gaither,
Mm-hmm.
Mike Hilton.
Yeah.
Like that's a lot of like core guys from that defensive team that you
Mm-hmm.
can't afford to lose. And I know you filled some of them in, but like you're asking a lot out of your rookies and guys on the team now to step up and hold the fort for you.
Yeah. So like, it is a concern. For the win projection here, I'm saying 8 to 12 ish wins is kind of where I see them at. Like I said, their offense realistically can keep them in any game. So it's like they could be on the right side of some of these shootouts this season. Just there is a better chance for
Yeah.
that, which bumps up my win projection to 12. They could be competing for the division in that capacity. But also, just looking at their defense, the losses that they took, and just like, yeah, just with that, I feel like an 8-win floor. I don't think it's like out of the question here. It's similar-ish to like what you had last season. I mean, maybe slightly worse, but like like it's, which will suck, because like I feel like it could be a very similar year to last year, where they start out slow and they lose a couple shootouts, and then they finish out strong but just barely miss the playoffs again. Wouldn't be out of the realm of possibilities, And so,
I'm gonna have to disagree. I think this season they turn it around. So I'm looking at the record last season. What did they
mhm.
finish last season? I think they had like 8 or 9 wins. No, not 2022. They were 9-8 last season.
Yeah, 9-8.
And if they start out 2-2, you're easily looking at a 10-win season. So I think I would
Mhm.
probably have a narrower range. I'd probably say 10 to 13.
Mhm.
10 to 13 wins is probably my range for that, because I do think they will go 2-2 at minimum. They can possibly go 3-1 or 4-0.
Yeah.
They have the talent to do it.
Yeah,
But
they certainly do.
I just look at the stretch out of the bye, and you got the Steelers away, then you're going away for the Baltimore Ravens 2 weeks later, and then in like an 11-game stretch, you got the Ravens twice, and in between that, you got the Bills,
Mm-hmm.
2 of which are away. Like that will be a crazy. And if Miami is really good late in the season, you got to go to Miami to play them.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's
Yeah.
going to be a really difficult game with a 4-game stretch. So that's where I would worry.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it really depends on how they start the first 4 games because they don't have the
Yeah.
Chiefs on their schedule. Like they probably won't have to see them until the playoffs. But in order to get to the playoffs, you gotta start off on the right foot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we'll see. Yeah, I guess like another thing too with them is just like the overall lack of like second year players in starting positions. Some of them, I mean, like it makes like I think Chris Jenkins is one of their higher slated picks, maybe second or third round pick last year. He's behind TJ Slayton, who they brought in free agency, and also BJ Hill. So it's like, oh, maybe he could still be a solid rotational guy here, but it's like, sure, that's one guy, but then you also have 2 other, down linemen who are even listed as third string guys here. You got backups in the secondary. Jermaine Burton, you're hoping can take a step up. Eric All, who I am a big fan of. He's just injured all the time. Matt Lee is your backup center, who's a second year, and then Amarius Mims is your lone starter from last year's class, which is like, like they seem to have lost more than they could kind of replace, which is kind of my concern, and which is why I still have it around that like 8 to 9 is kind of a floor for them. Which I'm like,
Right.
I think I think the odds of them being closer to your win projection is higher than 50%. So maybe like 70% shot they are a 10 to 12 win team, but I still think there's a 30% chance that they are maybe like an 8-9 win team at the end of the season. And so like
it depends on the coaching staff and the guys that replace. And I think back to the front office, when you hear that about your second year players, that means especially with the contracts you're handing out, I would only be comfortable handing out those contracts if I was drafting well as a front office. And they're not drafting well enough for them to be like, oh, we'll pay Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and we'll like string Trey Hendrickson along about this contract because we don't really want to. Like, you don't have the luxury of doing that because you haven't hit on your draft picks. Like Sam Hubbard retired, and you don't have a future edge rusher. You don't have a future linebacker that's ready to step in and fill the gaps. Like, that's proven. And you're taking literally your best player on the defense and not even defining a future for him. Like, that's a valid concern. So I might bring my prediction down. Like, if they're not able to sign Trey Hendrickson, they have to end up trading him, which will be a massive blow to the scheme. I think they have an outside shot of making it to the Super Bowl, but that's with Hendrickson, and without him, I don't think they're even making the playoffs.
Yeah, and I'm just in my head, I'm always just like with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I feel like you can never really count this team out of a game, except for however they played against the Patriots, where they lost 16-10 last season. But outside of that, I'm like, you really can't count these Bengals, this offense, out of any game just because of how talented those 3 players are. Plus Chase Brown, he's a solid player there. Gesicki he's all right. Noah Fant's a decent backup, I guess. The O-line.
Is Noah Fant somebody you're worried about? Do you think he could take the starting role?
No.
Okay. Cool.
He couldn't.
Like, I agree.
The Seahawks were comfortable cutting him in favor of AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo. I'm a fan of Arroyo, but like that's who they were comfortable cutting you for, like to be the future tight ends of the Seahawks. And then you're behind Mike Gesicki, who I think is like a mid-average at best kind of tight end, And so it's like that's like, I mean, no fan straight line speed, it's all right, but like outside of that, okay, bro.
But to be fair, in that situation, it's a great spot for him. Like you're not gonna, she's not gonna have to like command double teams. Like Jamar's got that covered. You got T Higgins to worry. You're not even worried about it. I'm really excited about what Jermaine Burton can do in a second season. I'm hoping he's been traded a lot, and if he shows a lot of promise, maybe you do have leeway to trade T Higgins next season. But yeah, I mean, to your point, offense, I'm not worried. I think offense will keep them in it. It's just like, can they make the necessary changes on defense? And we'll have to wait and see.
For sure. Cool.
Alrighty, guys, that wraps it us. We did all 8 divisions for you. So next week in the week's fire, up to Labor Day, we should have some fun divisional fantasy rankings review. Until then, tune in on a Modern Mission on our YouTube channel to catch when the latest episodes are, and our Instagram page at amon.a.mission. Thank you guys so much. You've been great. We hope you enjoyed our summer series. We hope you pay attention to the series and season and see like our predictions way true, or will the Bengals end up winning the Super Bowl and we're completely off base about their defense? Let's find out. But until then, we'll see you later.
Peace. Yeah.